The studio lights blazed down on the stage, giving everything that sharp, almost surgical clarity that live television demands. It wasn't just any political panel, this was America Tonight, one of the most watched primetime shows in the country. The producers had been teasing this segment all week, Jessica Tarlov versus Kristi Noem. Tension was baked in before a single word was spoken. Kristi Noem entered first, radiating confidence. She was dressed impeccably, her practiced smile perfectly in place, her stride that of someone who had weathered countless interviews. But this time, the vibe was different. She wasn't walking into a friendly environment, she was walking into a challenge. Moments later, Jessica Tarlov walked out. Unlike Noem, she wasn't smiling. She carried a stack of papers, not props, but evidence. Her posture was steady, her expression calm but razor-sharp. It wasn't performative, it was surgical. The audience reacted with a low, anticipatory murmur. They could sense what was coming. The host's voice cut through the buzz. "Tonight," he announced dramatically, "we're diving into the controversy surrounding Governor Kristi Noem's recent statements on state spending, transparency, and policy accountability. And joining us, Jessica Tarlov, known for never holding back." The crowd cheered, but Jessica didn't wave. She simply nodded once, her eyes fixed on Noem. Kristi returned the gaze with a politician's polite smile, but a flicker of discomfort betrayed her. As the debate began, Noem launched into her opening statement, smooth, rehearsed, and full of buzzwords about freedom, responsibility, and leadership. She spoke like someone expecting applause. Jessica let her finish. Then, without raising her voice, she leaned slightly forward and said, "Governor, the problem with your speech is that it sounds good, but it's built on lies." The audience gasped. The host froze for half a second, sensing the shift. Noem's smile faltered. This wasn't going to be a polite exchange. This was going to be a takedown. The air in the studio thickened instantly. Noem blinked, caught off guard by Jessica's direct accusation. For a split second, the governor's polished exterior cracked, but then she forced a smile, leaning back in her chair as if unfazed. "Well, Jessica," Noem began, her tone dripping with practiced charm, "I think calling something a lie just because you disagree with it is a bit dramatic, don't you?" Jessica didn't even flinch. She slowly flipped through her stack of papers, deliberately letting the silence stretch. The audience leaned forward, sensing that something big was coming. "This isn't about disagreement," Jessica replied coolly. "It's about facts." She held up a highlighted document to the camera. "This is the governor's official budget report from last quarter. Page 14, line 7, it states that state spending on private security contracts was reduced by 12%. But according to invoices released last week under a transparency request," she held up another sheet, "those costs actually went up by 22%. That's not a difference of opinion. That's a lie." The crowd erupted in a low, collective gasp. The host turned toward Noem, eyebrows raised. Camera zoomed in on her face. Her smile tightened. Noem shifted tactics. "Well, I can't be expected to know every line of every document." Jessica cut her off with surgical precision. "You signed it." A thunderous reaction came from the audience, some gasping, some applauding. Noem's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She looked at the host for rescue, but he stayed quiet, sensing a viral moment unfolding. Jessica leaned back, still calm. "Governor, when you present false numbers to the public and then act like it's just a misunderstanding, that's not leadership. That's deception." Noem tried to regain her footing, forcing a laugh. "You sure came prepared, didn't you?" Jessica gave a faint, cold smile. "Someone has to be." The crowd cheered. Noem straightened her posture, trying to mask her unease. But everyone in that studio knew, Jessica had drawn first blood, and it landed deep. The host, sensing the shift in power, leaned forward with a grin that barely hid his excitement. "Governor Noem," he said, "Jessica just accused you of presenting false information to the public. That's a serious charge. Do you want to respond?" Noem smoothed the edge of her blazer, her practiced politician's smile returning like a shield. "Of course," she began, her voice firm but forced. "This is exactly the kind of media ambush conservatives have come to expect. You take a single line, twist it, and call it a lie to score points." The audience murmured, some clapping, others skeptical. Jessica raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Twist it? Governor, I literally read your own signed report. You can call it media spin all you want, but the numbers don't lie, even if politicians sometimes do." A wave of laughter and applause broke through the tension. Noem's face stiffened for a moment before she tried to counter. "Well, Jessica, maybe if you spent less time on TV panels and more time actually governing something, you'd understand how complex these things are." Jessica leaned forward now, her voice sharpening. "I understand that when leaders misrepresent financial records to the public, it's not complexity, it's dishonesty. And I also understand that when they get caught, they usually change the subject. Like you just did." The crowd exploded. Gasps, cheers, even a few "ohs" echoed through the studio. The host covered his mouth in half-genuine, half-delighted shock. Noem's smile faltered. She tried to regain control by speaking over Jessica. "You think you're some kind of watchdog? This is why people don't trust pundits, you attack but never offer real solutions." Jessica didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "The solution," she said calmly, "is to stop lying to voters." The entire room went silent for a beat. Noem blinked rapidly, clearly rattled. Her composure, usually unshakable in interviews, had developed visible cracks. And Jessica knew it. She didn't gloat, she didn't need to. Her calm, relentless precision was doing the work for her. Every word she delivered landed like a clean hit, and the audience was hanging on each one. This wasn't just a debate anymore, it was a dismantling, happening in real time. Kristi Noem shifted in her chair, the subtle discomfort now impossible to hide. Her PR-trained smile trembled for half a second, just long enough for the cameras to catch it. She leaned toward the mic, adopting a sterner tone. "Jessica, you sit there with your papers and your TV studio confidence, but you have no idea what it's like to actually run a state. It's easy to criticize when you don't have to make real decisions." Jessica tilted her head slightly, her expression calm but cutting. "Governor, leadership isn't about hiding behind complexity when the truth comes out. It's about owning your choices, even the bad ones." The audience broke into applause, some even whistling. The host raised his eyebrows as if to say she's not holding back tonight. Noem shot back quickly. "And what gives you the authority to question how I govern? You're not elected, you're not accountable to voters, and frankly, you don't represent anyone but yourself and your ratings." Jessica leaned in, her voice cool and surgical. "No, Governor, I represent facts. And the difference between you and me is that facts don't need a campaign to stand on their own." The crowd roared. Even the host struggled to contain a grin as he glanced between them like a referee who knew the knockout was coming. Noem tried to regain footing by shifting the narrative. "You know, Jessica, people are tired of elites lecturing them about how they should live. I grew up on a ranch. I've lived the struggles of real Americans." Jessica didn't miss a beat. "And those real Americans deserve honesty. Whether you grew up on a ranch or in a city, lying to taxpayers is lying. Your background doesn't give you a free pass." The crowd gasped again, this time louder. Someone in the audience even shouted, "She got her." Noem inhaled sharply, blinking hard. Her usual go-to lines were collapsing under Jessica's relentless precision. Every time she tried to pivot, Jessica pinned her back down with cold, irrefutable facts. This wasn't a shouting match. It was a chess game, and Tarlov had already taken her queen. The host finally cut in, trying to keep the segment from completely spiraling. "Alright, this is getting intense. Governor Noem, Jessica clearly came prepared with some heavy evidence tonight. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll give you both a chance to respond fully." The studio lights dimmed slightly as the show cut to commercial. But the energy in the room was electric. The audience wasn't checking their phones or talking to each other. They were waiting to see what would happen next. Because everyone could feel it, Kristi Noem was cornered, and Jessica Tarlov wasn't done yet. When the show returned from commercial break, the camera zoomed in on Kristi Noem's face. She had fixed her posture, smoothed out her jacket, and reapplied that politician's smile, but the slight tension in her jaw betrayed her. This time, she wasn't just facing an interview. She was facing a reckoning. The host turned to her first. "Governor Noem, before the break, Jessica laid out some pretty specific evidence contradicting your budget claims. I want to give you the floor to respond clearly." Noem straightened. "Thank you. Look, I don't appreciate being accused of lying on national television. The numbers Jessica presented, they're being taken out of context. There were emergency allocations that weren't reflected in the original report, and..." Jessica raised her hand slightly, not interrupting, just waiting. Noem continued, but her voice faltered when she noticed Jessica calmly reaching for another document. "Governor," Jessica said, her voice like a blade wrapped in velvet. "If you're referring to emergency allocations, they're listed here, Appendix C, Section 2. Total, $1.3 million. But the security contracts you approved went over $1.9 million. That's still a $600,000 discrepancy. Context doesn't erase arithmetic." The audience reacted with a mix of applause and stunned laughter. The host leaned back in his chair with a knowing look. She had receipts for everything. Noem tried to pivot again. "You're cherry-picking numbers." Jessica didn't let her finish. "I'm reading your numbers." The reaction from the crowd was immediate, a loud gasp followed by clapping. It wasn't a partisan response, it was the sound of a live audience watching a politician's carefully rehearsed defenses crumble in real time. Noem's eyes flicked to the host, then to the camera, then back to Jessica. She forced a smile, but the cracks were widening. "You think this is a game, Jessica? You're just here to humiliate me." Jessica leaned forward slightly. "No, Governor. I'm here to hold you accountable. If that feels like humiliation, maybe that says more about your record than my questions." The crowd erupted, cheers, whistles, even a standing ovation from a few in the back rows. Noem's face flushed, and she quickly took a sip of water, trying to regain composure. The host finally jumped in, trying to maintain balance. "Alright, let's bring it back down for a second. This is clearly a passionate exchange. Jessica, you've presented strong evidence. Governor, you're saying there's more context. Let's tackle this piece by piece." But deep down, everyone watching knew the truth. Noem wasn't steering the conversation anymore. Jessica Tarlov was. The studio had transformed into an arena. Every camera angle seemed to center on Jessica now, composed, razor-sharp, untouchable. Kristi Noem, usually a confident presence in any interview, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She wasn't used to being pinned down this way. The host leaned in, sensing the tension. "Jessica, you've clearly done your homework. Governor Noem, do you feel that Jessica is misrepresenting your record, or is this a disagreement over interpretation?" Noem seized the lifeline. "Of course she's misrepresenting it. This is exactly how the media works. They find someone with a nice stack of papers and a sharp tongue, and suddenly they're the hero, while real leaders get vilified." Jessica let her finish completely. Then, in a calm, unwavering voice, she said, "Governor, I'm not the media. I'm not here to perform. I'm here because when someone tells the public one thing and signs documents saying another, they deserve to be confronted. Whether it's comfortable for you or not. The audience erupted, this time with a mix of cheers and stunned murmurs. The host's eyes widened. This wasn't grandstanding, this was precision. Noem tried to go personal. You seem to think you know everything. Maybe that's the real issue. You're so convinced of your own righteousness, you can't imagine that people like me are trying to do the right thing in complicated situations. Jessica gave a half-smile, the kind that cut deeper than a raised voice ever could. Governor, complicated situations don't excuse misleading the public. They make honesty even more important. You don't get to hide behind complexity when the math doesn't add up. The studio went silent. No applause, no gasps, just that heavy, electric quiet that comes when a point lands so cleanly it doesn't need decoration. Noem's face tightened. You're twisting my words. Jessica shook her head slowly. No. I'm just repeating what's on paper. If your own reports twist your words, that's between you and your staff. The audience exploded. Laughter, cheers, even the host buried his face in his hands for a moment, muttering, "Oh my God," under his breath. Noem tried to interject, but Jessica held the floor with unshakable control. Governor, people deserve better than rehearsed talking points and political evasions. They deserve straight answers. And tonight, they're getting them, whether you like it or not. By now, it wasn't just the studio audience hooked. Across the country, viewers were flooding social media. Clips of Jessica's sharp comebacks were being clipped, captioned, and shared at lightning speed. #Tarlov vs Noem was climbing the trending charts. Noem could feel it, the narrative was slipping from her hands. And Jessica? She was just getting started. Kristi Noem took a deep breath, visibly trying to recover control. "You're good at sound bites, Jessica," she said with a tight smile. "But leadership isn't about winning arguments on TV. It's about making tough choices, something you wouldn't understand." Jessica leaned back in her chair slightly, crossing one leg over the other, the picture of controlled confidence. "You're right," she said evenly. "I'm not a governor. But I do understand honesty. And what I don't understand is why your tough choices never seem to match the reality written in your own reports." The audience responded with a mix of laughter and applause. Noem's smile cracked for a split second. The host tried to jump in to diffuse the growing tension, but Jessica wasn't finished. "Governor, you've built your reputation on being straightforward, on being a no-nonsense leader. So let's cut the nonsense. If your policy numbers were wrong, say it. If they were right, stand by them. But don't gaslight the public by pretending the discrepancy doesn't exist." The word gaslight hit the air like a spark to dry tinder. The crowd murmured louder. Social media feeds exploded in real time. #Jessica Tarlov trended with captions like, "She's not holding back fire," and "This is how you fact-check power." Noem stiffened. "I don't appreciate being accused of lying on national television." Jessica didn't flinch. "Then don't do things that look like lies," she shot back. The studio erupted. The audience's collective gasp turned into cheers, and even the host leaned back in his chair with a "wow" expression plastered across his face. Noem tried to steer the conversation toward policy again, but Jessica didn't let her escape. "You can pivot all you want," she said, her voice unwavering. "But the documents don't pivot with you. They stay the same. And so do the facts." Noem's talking points suddenly felt hollow against Jessica's precision. Every attempt to reframe the issue bounced off Jessica's calm, relentless pressure. The camera zoomed in on Jessica's face, no smugness, just focus. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't playing to the crowd. She was dismantling, piece by piece, a politician's carefully built narrative. Meanwhile, online, millions of viewers were glued to the confrontation. Clips were already spreading across platforms with captions like, "Tarlov just ended Noem's spin in 10 seconds flat," and, "You can't gaslight facts." It wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a masterclass in holding power accountable, live, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore. The tension in the studio had reached a razor's edge. Kristi Noem shifted in her seat, her fingers gripping the armrests as if anchoring herself. She tried a different tactic, appealing to emotion. "You know, Jessica," she said, her voice softening, "it's easy to sit here and criticize. But while you're talking, I'm out there making decisions that affect real families. Real lives." Jessica didn't miss a beat. "And those real families," she countered, "deserve leaders who tell them the truth, not polished half-truths. If those decisions are so important, they should withstand scrutiny. That's what leadership is supposed to be." The audience clapped loudly. The host tried to jump in, but Jessica's presence commanded the moment. Noem attempted to regain control by leaning forward. "You're making this about numbers on a page," she said. "But these are human issues. I have to make tough calls every day." Jessica nodded slowly, her tone sharp but respectful. "Exactly. And that's why honesty matters more, not less. When those numbers affect real lives, lying about them, or conveniently misrepresenting them, isn't just politics. It's betrayal." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Betrayal. The audience went silent. Even the host blinked, momentarily thrown by the gravity of Jessica's phrasing. Noem's face tightened. "You're twisting my intentions." Jessica leaned in slightly, locking eyes with her. "Intentions don't change outcomes. If people are hurt because they were misled, your intentions don't fix that." The crowd erupted. Gasps, cheers, even some standing claps from the back row. Noem visibly flinched at the wave of energy that had clearly turned against her. Social media lit up in real time. A clip of Jessica saying, "Intentions don't change outcomes," was posted with captions like, "Line of the Night Fire," and, "She just ended the excuse playbook." Noem tried to salvage the moment by invoking her record, listing off achievements, but Jessica calmly interrupted. "No one's questioning your ability to list bullet points. What's in question is whether you were honest about how you got there." The audience roared. The host raised his hands to quiet the room, but the momentum was already unstoppable. The camera zoomed out, catching the two women in stark contrast, Noem, visibly rattled and defensive, and Jessica, composed and unyielding. This wasn't a clash of soundbites anymore, it was a clash of integrity versus image. And in that moment, Jessica Tarlov was clearly winning. By this point, the audience was fully on the edge of their seats. Even the camera operators seemed to linger a little longer on Jessica's reactions, sensing that they were capturing a viral moment in real time. Governor Noem, desperate to regain control, straightened her posture and raised her voice. "You're attacking me for doing my job, Jessica. You sit in studios, I run a state. I deal with real consequences. You talk." Jessica didn't flinch. In fact, she smiled slightly, not mockingly, but knowingly. "And yet," she replied, her voice calm and sharp, "it seems like all your real consequences still have to answer to a few pages of truth you signed your name on. Power doesn't excuse accountability, Governor. It demands it." The audience erupted. Applause, cheers, a few standing up in excitement. The host leaned back in his chair, hands raised in disbelief. "This is getting intense," he muttered into his mic, half to himself. Noem tried again. "You don't understand the pressure. It's easy to sit there and pick apart words when you don't have to make the hard calls." Jessica's eyes sharpened. "Pressure doesn't give you the right to mislead people. Pressure is when you're honest even when it costs you. Leadership isn't about how loud you can talk, it's about whether you can stand by your words when they're held up to the light." The studio fell into a heavy silence. It wasn't the kind of pause that came from awkwardness. It was the kind that comes when someone just dropped a truth bomb that couldn't be ignored. Noem hesitated, clearly caught between continuing her political talking points or trying to pivot again. Jessica didn't give her the chance. She leaned forward, her tone measured and firm. "Governor, this isn't personal. It's public. You stood in front of millions and told them one thing. Your own documents told another. You can call me a pundit, you can call me a critic, but you can't call me wrong." The crowd exploded. Chants of "Jessica! Jessica!" broke out from a group in the back, and the host struggled to restore order. On social media, the clip was already trending with captions like, "Tarlov shuts Noem down with surgical precision," and "This is how you hold power to account." Noem's eyes darted toward the host for support, but even he didn't step in. This wasn't his moment to save. It was hers. And she had seized it completely. The air inside the studio felt charged, almost electric. What had started as a routine political debate had transformed into something bigger, a moment no one could look away from. Kristi Noem, usually in control of any conversation, sat rigid, her carefully rehearsed composure visibly cracked. Jessica Tarlov, on the other hand, was calm, poised, and unwavering. She wasn't yelling. She didn't need to. Every word had landed like a calculated strike. The host, clearly sensing history in the making, leaned toward his mic. "Governor Noem, Jessica, final thoughts?" Noem forced a smile, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her frustration. "I'll just say this, leadership is messy. It's not easy. And I'm proud of the decisions I've made for my state." Jessica nodded respectfully, but her eyes were steady. "No one's saying leadership is easy, Governor," she replied smoothly. "But honesty isn't optional. It's the minimum. And if leaders expect trust, they have to earn it, not with slogans, but with truth." The audience erupted into thunderous applause. Even those who disagreed with her politically couldn't deny the sharpness of her argument. Noem opened her mouth to respond, but the roar of the crowd drowned her out completely. As the camera zoomed out, the host gave a knowing smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think that's all the time we have tonight." Jessica glanced briefly toward Noem, not with gloating, but with the cool confidence of someone who had stood their ground and won the argument through sheer clarity. Social media went into overdrive. Within minutes, clips of Jessica's "honesty isn't optional" line were spreading like wildfire across platforms. Hashtags like #Tarlov owns Noem, #TruthOverSpin, and #viral debate were trending nationally. Comment sections were flooded with reactions. "She destroyed her with facts, not insults. This is the Jessica Tarlov people need to see more often. Noem tried every trick in the book. Jessica burned the book." By the time the lights dimmed and the set cleared, the narrative had already escaped the studio. Across the country, viewers weren't just entertained, they were talking. Arguing. Reflecting. Jessica had done more than win a debate. She had owned the moment. And as the final camera faded to black, one thing was clear: this clash would be remembered. Moments like this remind us why strong voices matter. Jessica Tarlov didn't just show up to debate, she showed up to stand her ground. In a world where spin often overshadows truth, clarity still cuts through the noise. Tonight wasn't about politics. It was about honesty, courage, and refusing to back down when it matters most. If you believe in holding power accountable and speaking truth with strength, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful moments like this. This is Jessica Tarlov Stories, where words meet impact.